first of all, what is emotional intelligence? We'll have Jacqueline get into that in a second. But my curiosity is, for those of you who are live, when you think about the terms emotional intelligence, emotional quotient, what kind of words come to mind? What kind of experience have you had, maybe reading about it, maybe applying it to yourself? It could be one word, it could be a phrase, it could be, how effective, why it's important to you, right? But Jacqueline, what is emotional intelligence, first of all?
Yeah, it's a good question. EQ, which emotional intelligence, EQ, we interchange those terms a lot. Really, EQ is a measure of emotional intelligence. And what is emotional intelligence? It is really a set of emotional and social skills that influence the way we do pretty much everything. Perceive and express ourselves, develop and maintain relationships, solve problems, make decisions, deal with stressful situations, change, as we've all been dealing with so much of that in the last few years, and how we use emotional information in an effective and meaningful way, and in this case, as a leader.
Right. And one of the things that I often think about when I talk about emotional quotient is something to do with relating socially to people. Is that kind of also along the lines of what you mean when you talk about emotional intelligence?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. How we relate, but I think that the most critical thing about emotions that a lot of us we're really starting to understand, but I don't think we're always aware of, is our emotions are showing up constantly all the time. We're driven by emotions, and we have to be able to really be aware of those emotions and learn to manage them through social situations, through crisis, through all of these different things that we have to face on a daily basis in our personal and work lives. So it's really, our emotions are there, they're driving us. We need to understand them better.
Right. And so why does this matter at the end of the day?
Why does it matter? Such an important question. So there's a lot of research. This is not new. Emotional intelligence has been around for many, many years. A lot of people know the work of Daniel Goleman, but I think, why is it so important today? Well, today's environment is constant change, so many unknowns, so much more pressure, high demands, high expectations. And so we're living in this kind of crazy time, and there's a lot of fatigue, a lot of burnout. And so again, our emotions are very much on the surface a lot of the time. So we need to get better at understanding and managing our emotions so that we can recognize and influence, right, the emotions of others around us. And that's really critical for leadership. We also know that, if you look at all the research that's been done on this, I think it's estimated that EQ is directly responsible for it's about 55% of success in all jobs. So again, we know it's really important. We also see, when we look at and assess top performers, that about 90% of top performers will have high emotional intelligence. So if we aspire to elevate our leadership, to continue to grow as a leader, we really need to pay attention to our emotions.
Right. I have a question for our audience. If emotional quotient is regulating our emotions and how we react to situations, what have been some of the challenges for you in different work situations? I mean, everybody here in the audience are senior leadership executives and have been in tremendously stressful situations, whether it's one-on-one, whether it's in a group meeting or maybe a plenary session or something. What have been some of the challenges that have taken over as far as helping you to regulate your emotions and how you interact with other people? And I think more importantly is, on a scale of 1 to 10, where do you think you would stand as far as being able to regulate your emotion, right? So 10 being I'm completely in charge of my emotions all the time, and 1 being is I'm all over the place all the time. And don't worry, your names will be anonymous. So I'm just trying to get an unofficial idea of kind of how people stand on that. Great. Thank you, Jacqueline.
I'd like to meet some of those 10s, Simeon.
Yeah, you're probably one.
Pretty hard thing to do, right?
Yeah, you're probably one of those 10s.
Oh, no, definitely not. I think, listen, the other thing I was thinking about as you were saying that is, I don't want to ignore the importance of technical skills and experience. I mean, this is a given, right? When we're interviewing for jobs, when we're in leadership roles and we want to elevate. But this is really about how we're showing up as leaders, how we're in terms of our emotions. And that today is really, again, as we're going up the ladder, that is really what recruiters and organizations are looking for. So just to make that point.
Oh, we have someone in the audience who said that they're a 9.
Ooh, that's impressive.
I'd love to meet him as well. We have a 10. Someone coming in as a 10.
Okay.
So maybe we'll kind of connect you with our audience member there. We'll come back to some of the other comments that have been made, but keep them coming in. Folks, please let us know. This is an emotional topic, right, for all of us. So please do feel free to let us know.
I like the honesty. Anyway, that's good.
Absolutely. Okay, so how do we measure EQ?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways to measure EQ, and there's, as you can imagine, a lot of assessment tools. The one I'm going to talk about today is the EQI 2.0. It's one of probably one of the most used tools around the world. It's psychologically validated, 20 years of research. So it's very respected. A lot of organizations use it. A lot of search firms. I work with search firms who use it to assess finalist candidates, etc. So, and it assesses the 15 core competencies that can constitute emotional intelligence. And it's really just a self-reporting tool. So you're answering a bunch of statements about how you are showing up and how you relate to these questions. And then that gives us sort of a snapshot of sort of probably where your strengths and, areas for development are.
And if this is a self-reported tool,
yes,
often do you recommend your clients try to get some input or feedback from your peers, right? Because obviously people who work with you probably would be able to tell you that you are always very angry, or they'll tell you that, you're very calm. So do you incorporate, and how should your clients incorporate, feedback from other people?
Yeah, good question. I mean, there's an EQI 360 too, and I do 360s with some of my clients. I think this is a baseline for me, for clients, for them to really connect with how they are showing up. And I find 9 out of 10 times when we do the debrief, if they're honest in how they answer the questions, and why wouldn't you be, because it's for them, it tells them things. They learn about themselves. They recognize some of the things that come up, the strengths and the areas that they would like to work on. So I think it's a really good self-reflective tool. Getting feedback is always critical when you're in any kind of work environment or leadership role, but we want to be being very strategic about how we collect that feedback, because 360s can be great, but they can also not be effective. So it really depends on the situation.
Right. And I think the point that you made about depends on the situation is a critical one, right? Because I think all of us have been in situations where we're relatively comfortable with that, and how we modulate or regulate our emotions and how we respond based on that can be a lot calmer than other situations. But that's great. The reason why I asked that, Jack, is because we have an audience member who expressed that I have been told that I am too unemotional. And so maybe we can come back to that after the circle of the framework that we'll talk about next. But that's an important question. What if you are too unemotional? Well, what does that actually mean? So let's camp on this for a little bit.
Yeah, I'd love to come back to that, because I'm sure a lot of people will relate to that. I'm not assertive enough. I don't have enough confidence. Right. I mean, you could slip anything into that statement, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so this is just the model, and I think to give people a sense of really what the core, so there's sort of 5 categories here. So if you look at the self-perception, self-expression, etc., and then under each there's 3, and so total of 15 sort of competencies that we are evaluating through this tool. So I'm just going to walk you through how this all works together. These are not separate competencies. They really all influence each other. So self-perception, what is that really? That is our self-awareness. Are we aware of our emotions, right? Are we able to really understand, right, our feelings when they come up, how they impact us, how they drive us? And then the more self-perceptive we are, we tend to be more comfortable being self-expressive, right? So we're able to really be assertive, be direct, express our emotions, express how we feel about things. So self-perception does influence self-expression. And then if we're aware of our emotions and we're fairly comfortable expressing our emotions, that tends to help us with relationships, right? So then we move into the interpersonal category. And it also helps us with empathy, right? It's hard. How can you show empathy if you have trouble expressing your own feelings, right? So it's
Right.
all very much connected. And we know relationships are so important, and empathy in today's work environment. And then all of that, again, feeds into decision making. And why is that? Because this is not about, we're not assessing whether you're a good problem solver, decision maker. We're assessing how are your emotions impacting your ability to problem solve or,
Right.
make good decisions. Because are you too reactive? Are you biased? Are you taking other people's input into account? So again, we're looking at, how your emotions impact that. And then finally, in the stress management category, again, that is about how are you managing stress. So when, as you said earlier, if you're really angry or someone's disagreed with you or you've been rejected, or there's a million different things that can really get us going in a work environment. How are you able to manage that, right? Manage those emotions. How flexible can you be? What kind of stress tolerance do you have? And are you can you be optimistic, right? Can you say, okay, this is a big problem, but I know I can figure it out and move forward. So these are sort of the core things that this tool evaluates, but also really that a lot of recruiters and organizations are looking for in their leaders.
So when you work with your clients, do you sometimes, because I look at this wheel and I think about my own professional career, right? There are certain points in my time in my career where interpersonal skills are not, doesn't seem to be an issue for me, right? But other things are. And so self-expression at that point might be assertiveness or the way that we advocate for ourselves, whatever that might mean. Or it might be stress management where maybe I have a newborn, right? And but is there any particular area that's more important than the other, or kind of are they all, the same? You're trying to kind of grow in them, and some cases you might grow more than others. How would you comment on that?
So yeah, before I answer that question, I want to say that you've brought up a great point or distinction about emotional intelligence, which is that these are not fixed. So unlike IQ, or some people feel, a lot of researchers feel personality is quite fixed. Emotional intelligence is something we can dial up and dial down based on situation or just being more intentional. So, and in fact, if you were to do this test, now and 5 years from now or 10 years ago, you would definitely see differences because it is often going to be impacted by what's going on in your life and what's more important to you, or what you're dealing with at that time. So it makes perfect sense that you would be high in certain things and maybe low in others, and then that might shift over time, right? And a couple of examples, what I look for, I don't think it's hard to say which of these is most important, except I would say that emotional self-awareness, just self-awareness in general, in my opinion, as a coach and as someone who worked in a C-level role, that's the foundation. So if you are lacking awareness, so for instance, the person who commented in the chat or the Q&A, if you're getting feedback that doesn't sort of line up with how you think you're operating, you need to check that. It might not be right, but you need to check it. That's self-awareness, right? So I think self-awareness is the foundation to all of these other things, really being able to be in the moment and say, am I doing my best to, provide an empathetic ear? Am I present for this person? Am I being direct enough here? Am I being assertive enough? All of that comes from really our self-perception and being emotionally self-aware.
Right. And again, I'd love to hear from the audience here. So when you look at the framework that Jacqueline has just provided and thinking back to maybe reflecting on yourself just for that past 10 minutes, right? Which ones of these do you struggle the most with? Because I'd be interested in knowing, in today's environment of the corporate world, which is the hardest to manage? And I'd love to hear from the audience. Type it in Q&A. What is it that you struggle the most with and you want to work on more? And the other thing is, does this make sense, right? Does this make sense when you think about emotional intelligence and how Jacqueline has provided this? Is there anything that's missing that you'd want to ask Jacqueline about? One last thing is I'd love to go back to the audience member who said they were a 10. And now after looking at this framework,
Hmm.
You still think that you're a 10. Okay. All right, great. So just camping out a little bit here for a second. Go ahead, Jack,
Yeah.
and talk. This is the results
Yeah,
here.
and this is just really a more detailed format of what we just looked at. So you can see on the right-hand side, the 5 categories: self-expression, self-perception, etc. But if you look underneath and you look at these bars, this is the kind of report that you would get if you filled out this assessment or another assessment. And it really just shows you where you fall relative to a number of other professionals who have done this, this assessment.